WRGW District Radio.
You are listening to WRGW District Radio on gwradio.com.
We're Future Islands, and you're listening to
WRGW.
Hi, this is Lydia Slocum from People Little Horse, and you're listening to WRGW District Radio.
You're listening to Radio George Washington. Home to the realest rock in the district. Brain-melting rock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Only on Radio George Washington, WRGW.
In the beginning, there was radio. And then came the advent of the internet.
Ooh. Ow! My ankles are broken! My ankles are broken!
His ankles are broken!
Broken ankles!
Keep it true!
I got broken ankles!
It's coming, Phil!
You are listening to WRGW District Radio.
I got broken ankles!
It's coming, Phil!
Good evening, folks. I'm your host, Henry Scriven-Young, and welcome back to Uptime. Pure gaming, tunes and news, no cheat codes required, here on WRGW District Radio. I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in last week, and a special thank you to everyone who has tuned in for tonight's show. For those of you who don't know, Uptime is a music show where I play the soundtracks from video games. I'll also be throwing in some news and other fun bits, so sit back and relax as we jump into tonight's show. You know what's crazy? As I was prepping for tonight's game, I realized that I have never covered a rhythm game on Uptime before. I've covered games with rhythm, and great ones at that, but never a tried and true rhythm game. So, tonight, I will be covering Uptime's first rhythm game. Tonight's game is a true rhythm game, one that will have your feet stomping and your heart pumping, all in time to the beat. Tonight's game is one that I've never played, but comes highly recommended. Crypt of the NecroDancer. For those unfamiliar with tonight's game, here's a quick rundown. Crypt of the NecroDancer is a roguelike rhythm game by Brace Yourself Games. The game takes fundamental elements of a roguelike dungeon exploration game and adds a beat-matching rhythm game set to an original soundtrack. The player's actions are most effective when moving the character set to the beat of the current song and are impaired when they miss a beat, so it's necessary to learn the rhythmic patterns that the various creatures follow. The mixed genre game includes the ability to import custom music and the option to use a dance pad instead of traditional controllers or the keyboard. The game was released for Linux, OS X, and Windows in April of 2015, being co-published by Klei Entertainment for the PlayStation 4 and Vita in February of 2016, for the Xbox One in February of 2017, and for the Nintendo Switch in February of 2018. Crypt of the NecroDancer Pocket Edition, developed for iOS, was released in June of 2016. Crypt of the NecroDancer is a top-down, 2D roguelike rhythm game in which the player controls one of a selection of characters to explore several levels of an underground dungeon that are procedurally generated, similar to roguelike games. Enemies drop coins when killed, and killing successive enemies without taking damage or missing a beat increases a coin scoring multiplier. Failure to match the beat does not directly harm the character in most situations, but does reset the scoring multiplier and may cause the character to be harmed by a nearby monster if they're in their attack path. The character can also be harmed by moving into a monster's path. With all of that out of the way, let's get back to the music. And welcome back. That was Watch Your Step and Disco Descent. So, talking about these two games kind of generally first, I think these two songs are really, really awesome. I think one of the things about a rhythm game that is good to, like, appreciate, and I feel like is something that, like, you know, other games have, but this is, like, very, very evident of, is, you know, extremely high musical quality, right? Not only is this, like, interesting, it kind of keeps your feet tapping throughout, but it is literally designed to make you like how it sounds, right? The beat sounds really good, it's really consistent, you've got a very nice, strong overall use of various instruments. If you listen to the past episode, a couple episodes ago of Uptime's How Is Music Made, right? You'd know about, you know, the various ways that instruments are used and how those are put into tracks like these. And I think that kind of stuff is really incredible. And I love the kind of techno vibes of each of these songs. I think between these two, Disco Descent is probably my favorite. It gives kind of like arcade cabinet-esque vibes. And for me, that is it. I'm a big fan. So I think I'm looking forward to the rest of the soundtrack. And I think these are two great opening songs. Before we move on to our next section of music, I'd like to talk about our sponsor for today's episode of Uptime. This episode of Uptime is sponsored by the George Washington University Geology and Earth Sciences Society. The mission of the George Washington University Geology and Earth Sciences Society, or GWU GESS, is to build and support the earth sciences community at GWU and in the local area by promoting social, professional, and educational development for students and staff alike. GESS will achieve the stated mission by hosting social events, academic meetings, alumni networking events, and others. If you have questions or would like to be involved, you can join via Engage or contact the official email at gwugess@gmail.com. Again, that's gwugess@gmail.com. Would you like to sponsor Uptime? Well, each week I will shout out, as I just did, a GW student organization. You can sponsor Uptime by submitting the sponsorship form found on the Uptime website at sites.google.com/view/uptime-WRGW. Or you can head to my Instagram account, where I have that website linked throughout my profile. And a reminder that this is not financially compensated. It's more of a shout out type of thing to promote student organizations here at GW. Additionally, the Uptime website has been updated since our last show, so I encourage all of you to take a look and explore the website while we take a quick break.
This is Francie from Flory. You're listening to WRTW.
What is it? WRGW District Radio?
WRGW District
Taking
Radio.
notes?
Taking notes on WRGW District Radio.
Hi, this is Alec Puglisi, and you're listening to Taking Notes on... Oh, crap. I messed it up.
Try it again.
What is it? I'm terrible at this.
WRGW.
WRGW. Hi, I'm Alec Puglisi, and you're listening to Taking Notes on WRGW Radio. Is that right?
Yeah, there you go.
Alec Puglisi is a local photographer who just released a new photo book in partnership with Comet Ping Pong, one of the best venues around. You can find Comet Book Volume 1 on rediscoverfirebooking.com and more of Alec's work on his website, alecpugliese.com.
You should have prepped me, and I should have wrote it down, and I could look at it. I'm bad at memorizing things. But thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hear from him and others working in the arts on Taking Notes for WRGW District Radio.
Like what you hear? you can host your own show with WRGW. Go to gwradio.com and click the Get Involved tab to join our team.
welcome back to Exclamation Point Uptime here on WRGW District Radio. I'm your host, Henry Scriven-Young, and that was Crypt, Mausoleum Mash, Conga Kappa, and Fungal Funk. So starting with the first one, I really love how each of these songs brings something different while still staying true to the, easy to follow, beat mashing kind of style. This first one, Crypt, has a killer beat, but it does so, it kind of has that beat through an almost rock kind of lens, which I really like. Like, this one is much more fast-paced, it's very interesting, and it does a nice way of segueing into the second one, which is Mausoleum Mash. And I think, in a weird way, this game kind of reminds me of Geometry Dash. Technically, I know Geometry Dash isn't like a rhythm game, but it makes a lot of similar musical choices, right? It has a beat that's very similar to follow. The rhythms are not extremely complex. They're very easy to follow, but they're musically interesting. They do something interesting. They have a beginning, middle, and end. They use dynamics. They use, different forms of music and the way music is made, staccato, legato, all that kind of musical-esque stuff. And I think that's really fascinating, and it's an interesting comparison that I hadn't thought of, because Mausoleum Mash, it doesn't sound like any particular song from the Geometry Dash game, but it reminds me of that because I'm sitting there going, man, I'm really tapping my feet. I'm really tapping along. I could totally play a game like this, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, in a sense, I kind of have. Conga Kappa is really great. I love the drums on this one. It's kind of funky. It's really good, clearly distinctive. I think if you were to ask me so far what my favorite piece was, I'd say this one. It's excellent. It's even better in my opinion than the one after, which is Fungal Funk. I like that this one's a little drawn back, a little more quiet. It still has kind of a beat you can follow, doesn't do anything too crazy. It's relatively piano or quiet in dynamics. I hope that throughout the rest of the soundtrack, things can still continue to be unique and interesting and don't get too samey. But we'll see what happens. A quick note here. Anyone and everyone you ask about this game will say one thing. It is a true masterpiece. A game that is not only musically stunning, but also incredibly designed. One IGN reviewer said this game is, quote, one of the most ingenious game design twists they've ever come across, end quote. After all, a roguelike tied to a rhythm game is just pure genius. But as with most rhythm and roguelike games, this game is complex and not everyone's cup of tea. IGN gave it an 8.8 out of 10 for that reason. And IGN is not the only one. Metacritic gave it an 87 out of 100. But you know what? That's okay. No, not everyone is going to like this, but this game is still impressive. I think the gamer, who gave the game an 8 out of 10, said it best. Quote, it's a really competent rhythm game with great music. You'll no doubt face frustrations with some of the game's overall difficulty spikes, but if you just want to rock out and chase some high scores, you'll have a blast. You can currently buy Crypt of the NecroDancer on Steam for $14.99, but if this isn't your jam, you can always just listen to the awesome soundtrack instead. And with that being said, let's move on to some more music. And welcome back to exclamation point Uptime. That was Grape Throbbing, Portobello Head, Metal Mancy, and Stone Cold. Starting with the first one, it's good, not super exciting. Honestly, for me, it doesn't really do too much. It's not a bad song. It's just not interesting. I think kind of sitting here and listening to the rest of these songs, there's some that I've been really blown away with that have done something interesting, and then there's songs like this where it's good, don't get me wrong, Grape Throbbing is fine, it's just not, it doesn't do anything particularly interesting, but it's still a good song. Portobello Head, on the other hand, is excellent. I think this one is a straight up vibe. I really like how it uses kind of it's more chill while still having that like strong background beat. There's a xylophone kind of lightly in the background. I'm not sure if you can hear it, but it is there. And I like the kind of dissolving choice at the end. Very cool. Metal Mancy is awesome. Very metal, obviously. Much more staccato, faster tempo, more instruments. You've got synthesizer, guitars, stronger dynamic, forte or louder, obviously. And I even like the middle, where it's just a few beats of drums as kind of the rest of the song cooks up. I think it's a great choice. Overall, great song. Stone Cold, I kind of feel this way about how I feel about the first one. I like the beat in this one, actually. I like how the kind of noise, it's a cool way to track the beat. But otherwise, the song's pretty medium. It's well designed, but it doesn't really blow me away like some of the other songs do. Moving on to the news, this past week in video game news had a lot of amazing stories, and PC Gamer really hit it out of the park with their reporting. I've selected 2 interesting stories from them, so without further ado, let's jump right into them. Our first story here. Today, a whole bunch of different people play video games. Today's audience is more diverse than ever, so that means ensuring these games are accessible for today's audience. Thankfully, Steam is already on it. In a recent Steamworks update, Valve announced a new accessibility support questionnaire for developers to better describe the way their games support accessibility. Anyone publishing a game on Steam now has access to a questionnaire where they tick boxes for the accessibility feature their games have. Have adjustable text size? Tick a box. Got narrated menus? Tick a box. In my opinion, this is a step in the right direction to help players find games they can and want to play. Here's some of the options Valve will start listing. Adjustable difficulty, save any time, custom volume control, narrated game menus, camera comfort, text-to-speech, and others. Our second story here. Michael Bay is directing a film based on the 1986 Sega arcade game Outrun. Sydney Sweeney will also help to produce it, but will not star in the film. It's no surprise, really. I mean, this is the golden age of video game adaptations. Fallout was great, everyone's raving about The Last of Us, the Sonic movies have made a lot of money, and a Minecraft movie continues to print cash despite chicken jockey shenanigans. But writer Joshua Wolins is not hopeful. Wolins said he is expecting, quote, some kind of less good Fast and Furious from the whole thing. Besides Bay and Sweeney, the only other name currently attached to the thing is scriptwriter Jason Rothwell, whose IMDb filmography does not fill me with confidence, end quote. As for me, I'm torn. Movie audiences seem to really like these adaptations, and I'm all for more people discovering the joys of video games. However, there's nothing super special about this movie so far. If it is off-brand Fast and Furious, I wouldn't be surprised, but I would be disappointed. And that's it for the news this week. As we move in the last 10 minutes of the show here, I'd like to talk about recordings. So the recording for Everybody's Gone to the Rapture was lost in the ether. It was lost in the ether. I couldn't find it. It wasn't in the uploaded drive, but I have it. I have acquired it. It is currently sitting in my email, so I will upload it to YouTube along with this episode as soon as possible. I thank you for your patience. Also, speaking about this show, the last show of the semester is going to be next week, 5/2. So be sure to tune in. It's the last one of the semester, and I've got something really big planned. So be sure to tune in. As always, you can expect recordings to be posted approximately 1 week after the airing of the show it corresponds with. Speaking of the website, be sure to fill out the special guest form, sponsorship form, and the show idea submission form. A reminder that this episode of Exclamation Point Uptime is sponsored by the George Washington University Geology and Earth Sciences Society. The George Washington University Geology and Earth Sciences Society, or GWU-GESS, has a mission to build and support the earth sciences community at GW and in the local area by promoting social, professional, and educational development for students and staff alike. GESS will achieve their stated mission by hosting social events, academic meetings, alumni networking events, and more. If you have questions or would like to be involved, you can join via Engage or contact the official email at gwugess@gmail.com. Would you like to submit your student org for sponsorship? Well, be sure to check out the Exclamation Point Uptime website, where the form to submit is at sites.google.com/view/uptime-WRGW. I'd like to thank you for listening in to tonight's episode of Exclamation Point Uptime on WRGW District Radio. I'm your host, Henry Scriven-Young, and I will see everyone next week for the final week. For your pure gaming tunes and news, no cheat codes required.
Hello, peasants. You're listening to WRGW. Oh, great. Now you tell me. Where there's always lots of fun. Are you kidding? And great music. Lies and slander. Tune in at gwugess.com.